Hey guys, Haz here at Shield K9, and I wanted to talk to you guys about a common myth that we deal with here a lot, and that we hear a lot. And that is the misconception that if you correct or punish your dog, you will make your dog more aggressive if your dog already is aggressive, or you will make your dog aggressive even if your dog isn't aggressive because you've corrected them. Now, like a lot of myths, there's a small kernel of truth to this, okay? Now hear me out. I'm going to give you the straight skinny. Let's go back a step. Let's talk a little bit about why this myth exists. Well, first off, it's unintentionally passed around, I think, by a lot of people that just don't know any better. They're primarily dog owners just telling each other, stuff that they've heard from other people, or they think that they've seen. And then there's also intentionally perpetrating this myth, and I've seen this on websites and actually come out of the mouth of people that claim to be professionals, that you're going to make your dog aggressive, or you're going to make your dog some kind of ticking time bomb or whatever. Anyways, and just so you know, by the professionals, I'm talking about the people, the usual suspects, force-free dog training advocates, etc. These are the ones that like to talk about this and say stuff like that. Anyways, like I said, remember there's a kernel of truth to this, and I'm going to get into that right now. First off, if you take 100 dogs, just a random, and look, we train a lot of dogs here. We train a lot of different breeds of dog here. We train, big dogs, small dogs, huskies, mastiffs, everything. All right. If you take about 100 dogs, maybe this would be true to some small degree for about 5 out of that 100. So about 95% of dogs, you can correct them any which way, as long as it's obviously reasonable and in a context that the dog understands. You're going to get nothing other than the desired result, which is for the dog to stop doing whatever it is that they're doing. Okay? Now, let's talk about that 5%. Okay, and you can quibble about the percentage points. I mean, maybe I'm off by 1 or 2, but like I said, we train a lot of dogs here. We get a pretty good feel for what equals what and how things are working in relation to this. About 5%, give or take a percentage point, are going to be the dogs that, if you correct them, they may respond with some form of aggression. Okay? So, let's talk about why this would happen. Because again, it's all, the devil is in the details, guys. The devil is in the details. Nothing, just because I say something doesn't mean that, just because I say 5% of dogs may become aggressive if you correct them, doesn't mean you shouldn't correct those 5% of dogs. Okay? So, there are fundamentally, I've divided it into 2 types of aggression that you'll see in relation to a correction from the 5%. Okay? The number 1 type, and the most common type of aggression that you'll see in relation to being corrected or even just restrained, is redirection. Okay? That is generally when you have a dog that is extremely excited, extremely frustrated, and extremely intense about something. And usually it's another dog, or even maybe a small animal or something else. And the dog is either being held back, or the handler attempts to correct the dog for going after the thing that he wants to go after, and the dog redirects all that energy, all that intensity, all that aggression onto the handler. Okay, so usually you'll see this where, somebody's kind of holding their dog on a leash and another dog's passing by and the dog's losing his mind, and then the handler kind of pulls back on the leash and the dog turns around and nips the handler, or actually even bites the handler. A good strong solid bite. It can happen. Happens sometimes in protection training if you're not careful. You don't know the dog that you're dealing with. There's multiple instances. Sometimes if you have multiple dogs, one or even both dogs, if they're, again, having trouble really regulating themselves and they're getting too intense, or you're allowing them to get in too intense, you'll see them turn on each other, right? So, this is the first type. Now, the second type, and thankfully more rare, is actual social aggression, okay? What is social aggression? Social aggression is when the dog makes an intentional decision to counteract what you did. You did something that he perceived as undesirable, so he's going to counter that undesirable thing that you did with his own undesirable thing back to you. So you punished him or corrected him, however you want to put it, and he says, you know what, you're not doing that to me, and here's what you get. And he turns around and he either snarls at you or he bites you. Okay? Luckily, it's less of a common thing. some people will call this, oh, he's being dominant towards me. We can quibble about dominance. A lot of the force-free types will tell you that dominance does not exist. It absolutely exists. Thankfully, it's quite rare to run into dogs that are truly dominant, truly want to control everything and everyone around them with the use of aggression if necessary. Thankfully, that's a relatively rare trait. You tend to run into it a lot with working line, Malinois, and Dutch Shepherds, sometimes German Shepherds, and then sometimes an assortment of other breeds. But again, thankfully not common. So anyways, social aggression and redirection. Okay? Now, let's talk about how you would deal, or how you would actually make the situation worse with a dog that redirects. Okay? So let's talk about the redirecting dog. He's aggressive at something, at a target. You restrain him or you correct him, and he turns that aggression to you. Okay? So most people, they don't know how to deal with this, because here's the thing about this type of dog. He's not thinking about it. More often than not, he's just reacting. He sees a stimulus, he reacts to that stimulus, and the reaction's going one way or another. So if you pull him back, he's going to turn that reaction onto you. If you let him go, he's going to direct all of that onto his target, the other dog or the other animal or whatever. So anyways, the way that you deal with this is the way that you deal with anything else. We are intelligent compared to dogs anyways, I would assume, hopefully, right? Set yourself up for success. Okay? Remember the fundamental behavioral principles that underlie everything. If I want to create a behavior, I reward it or reinforce it. Okay? Reinforcement can be positive or negative. Remember that. If I want to remove a behavior, I punish it, either positively or negatively. In this instance, it's going to have to be generally positive punishment. And by positive punishment, it's the addition of something. So usually it's a correction, leash correction, e-collar correction, bonk, whatever you want to come up with, okay? So first off, if I have a dog that redirects, generally what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring his energy level, which is usually way too escalated, right down. I'm going to bring his energy level right down, and I'm going to hold him accountable for the small things. So I don't ever let him ratchet up to level 100. I always keep him down around, level 1, level 2. So if he's not escalated, I have much less chance of having that redirection occur to me. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing, I will set him up to redirect on me, but I'll be smart. I'll use something like a muzzle, or I'll have something else handy that will allow me to stop him from redirecting onto me, right? Or at least prevent him from hurting me if he does, okay? And I'll set him up for it, and guess what happens when he redirects onto me? He gets corrected for that, because it's not appropriate to be aggressive towards me. I can punish a dog twice for two different things, as in, let's say he's being aggressive towards another dog. I'll correct him for that. And then if he tries to turn that on me, I'll correct him for that. And I'll do both those things on a regular basis. And I'll be faster than him. I'll be smarter than him, because I'm, again, hopefully a little bit smarter than a dog. And I'll preempt him. Okay? So after a while, maybe several repetitions of doing that, he'll realize, oh man, I guess it's not really, essentially it'll rewire his brain. First of all, we'll remove the reaction towards the target, which is the root of all the evil, essentially. We'll bring his energy level down, and then even if he does react towards the target and I correct him, he's already learned, hey, it's again, they're not really thinking about it, but kind of their brain is like a calculator, stimulus response. And he's learned, over several repetitions that the response to me, if it is aggression, is never good for him. So he will begin to avoid that as well. Okay? So that's in a nutshell how I'll deal with the redirecting dog. I'll use my tools. I'll make sure that I'm safe. I'll ensure that he understands I'll bring his energy level down. I'll make him more obedient. Okay? And then I'll correct him. I'll set him up for the bad stuff, and I'll correct him if he chooses to engage in the unhealthy behavior. Okay? So that's the easy dog. That's the redirecting dog. Now let's talk about the socially aggressive dog. Okay, and that's the dog where it's an intentional thing. You correct them. It could be for anything. It could be for, hey, you can't pee on my car tire. Or it could be, hey, I want you to sit, and if you don't sit, I'm going to give you this correction, right? And again, a lot of the positive only dog trainers will say, well, it's because he doesn't understand, he's frustrated, violence begets violence, blah, 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 blah. Look, first off, if you ever watch dogs in a group interacting, like a group that actually lives with one another, not the dog park, that's just chaos. But I'm saying, like, for example, a mother with her puppies, okay? For instance, when one of the puppy does something that she perceives as undesirable, like bite her tail with his sharp little puppy teeth, guess what she'll do? Generally, she'll snarl at him and bite him. And that puppy will run around screaming for a couple seconds, and then he'll come to his senses, and he might try it again. He might even try it 3 times if he's particularly stubborn or stupid. But generally after that, once he's been corrected a time or 2, he's done with the behavior. He didn't become more aggressive towards her. All right? Now let's talk about what would happen why the socially aggressive dog does what he does. He does what he does because you're trying to control him, and in response, he's trying to control you. Because for him, it's extremely desirable to engage in the behavior that you're trying to prevent him from engaging in. Whether it's, like I said, peeing on that car tire, or not sitting when he's been asked to sit, okay? Or anything you can come up with, right? Again, I'm going to set myself up for success. I'm going to ensure that, number one, the dog understands everything, right? That means in the beginning, I'm using very light leash pressure. I'm using a lot of positive reinforcement, a lot of treats, a lot of praise. I'm making sure this dog, without a shadow of a doubt, understands exactly what I expect from him. Then after that, I'm going to set him up. Okay? So I'm going to set him up. I'm going to make sure, again, I'm using my tools, so that he can't hurt me if he chooses to engage in the behavior, and I'm ready for him to engage in that behavior. And then, again, I'll set him up. And when he chooses to do the wrong thing, which is be aggressive towards me instead of doing what it is I asked him to do or not do, then he will be corrected for that. So, I will correct him for failing to follow my instructions, again, once he understands what I expect. And then I will correct him for any kind of aggression that he directs towards me in response to that. So, again, what are our rules, our fundamental principles of behavioral science? Reinforcement creates behavior. Punishment creates extinction, or makes at least the behavior less likely. Okay? So, we set the dog up. We give him an opportunity. He decides what he wants to do. Do I want to do the thing that I'm expected to do, that I know and understand that I should do? Or do I want to do the thing that is inappropriate because I think that that's going to give me my way, all right? Or I'm going to get my way by doing that. And if he chooses option number 2, I'm ready for him. And again, he's going to learn very quickly that that is a bad idea, okay? So oftentimes if you get a dog that's very predisposed towards this behavior, the social aggression, once you have shown him, hey, you don't win by doing that, again, and the redirection, the same thing. You'll see the behavior disappear. All right? Now, that's not to say that, hey, everything's great from now on and forever. Obviously not. All training has an element of decay in it if you don't maintain it. So at some point in time, because, again, behavior is primarily genetic in nature. There's a learned aspect to most behavior, but a lot of it's based in genetics, especially aggression. Aggression is primarily genetic, okay? A dog's aggression can be shaped by environment, but again, it's there or it's not, okay? The dog will, the dog may attempt some decay in his training, or some decay may occur where he kind of regresses a tiny bit if you're not careful and you don't watch him. But if you are on top of maintaining it, and you maintain it for a long period of time, generally it completely goes away. And we have countless, I wouldn't say countless, but a fair few dogs that we've trained that were socially aggressive, that are no longer socially aggressive. And we have a number of dogs that we've trained, not a number, a fair, I wouldn't know where to start. Maybe 100 recently, last 2 years, that would redirect and no longer redirect on their handler because they learned that that was a losing proposition, okay? And thankfully, like what I said, it's not a common thing. There's not a lot of them that will do that, but there are some. So these dogs that do become aggressive, do they justify this whole misconception that, hey, I can't punish my dog because I don't want him to become more aggressive? Well, your other option is to let him continue to engage in the behavior that you don't like. Your other option is to let him continue blowing you off. Is that something that you find acceptable? Well, if not, then you are going to have to introduce your dog to the concept of obligation. And obligation is, hey, you actually have to do this. I mean, we expect it from our children, I hope. I know some parents these days don't, which explains a lot of the stuff you see nowadays with kids. But, you know, obligation is an essential part of any dog training system that purports to be reliable or create anything